2021, four men got together to make a radio show that nobody asked for. This is the result.
Welcome to Broad Street Radio. I'm Michael Morris with Jonathan Meany.
Every time.
You know what? It's because your last name.
Should I make it
sucks.
Smith?
No, your last name. No, this is all staying in. We don't edit this out. Your name is terrible, but Jonathan Meany is here. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Mr. Morris?
Mine is so much easier. Now, we're going to go to our guest here in a minute, but I like to do this segment that you hate right off the bat.
It's the worst.
I will get this right. It's Munich on Money. Jonathan, that has to be your last name, and you hate when we do this segment because you hate the name of it. How are you, first of all?
I'm fantastic.
So get right into the thing that you love to do so much.
Alliteration aside, Marty, do you have any idea? Of,
you introduce the guest without introducing the guest. Who's the guest?
It's Marty Reed from Frog. Everybody knows Marty. They've heard his voice on the radio. They've seen him on the radio.
They do, but when this is on YouTube,
if you see a green dumpster, you call Frog Holland.
That's
it's
right.
one call dumps it all, right? I mean, everybody knows that.
He's got the byline.
This guy knows everything.
Do you have another name for this bit? Can we think about that?
Let's explain this to Marty. The guy is a financial genius, right? So his last name is Munich, or the way I say it, which I slaughter it. It's Munich on Money, where he gives a tip every week, and he hates it. And that's not my problem.
Okay.
He wants every guest to come in here and fix the name. It shan't be changed. Go ahead. What would your idea be for this terrible segment?
Give him time to think about it. Maybe
My idea for what?
the name of this segment. See, he didn't even know. That's how terrible the name is.
See?
Yeah, it's your fault.
So just give your financial wisdom to people before
My
we talk to
financial
Marty.
wisdom.
Oh, the segment?
Yeah.
Make it simple.
There you go. I like it.
Talking money with Mr. Munich.
Way better.
Hold on.
Wait, applause.
Nate, we're not changing that because I already wrote a song for Munich on Money that I'm going to sing myself.
All right. So, what do you want to know about money? You have any ideas? Because I'm.
Let me tell you what my idea would be. Just a little tip out there. People, when it comes to they're buying low, selling high, and then they panic and they want to sell anytime there's a little blip in the market. Your opinion on that?
Well, the reality is that the real risk when you invest your money. You've heard me say this time and time again. The real risk isn't losing everything; it's being forced into selling a good investment at a bad price. So, in order to make that not a problem, you have to make sure you have enough emergency cash on hand. Because the only time you're forced into selling anything is if you need the money, right? So, retirees, we're not investing all of their stuff in stocks that could go down or will go down at some point, right? We're holding money in cash to make sure they have their living expenses, their everyday needs met. So just make sure you don't put it all in there. Don't invest what you can't lose, and don't put yourself in a position where you're ever forced into selling good investments at bad prices.
Was that so hard? I was really good what you did, and I think it's because of my intro, not because Marty Reed from Frog Hauling, our guest today, decided to come in here and commandeer the show and change the. We only have like 2 bits in the whole show, and he decided to change it.
No, Marty, his wisdom on that gave me confidence to give you a better answer.
You don't have to kiss his ass; he's already here. Okay, Marty Reed from Frog Hauling, and I'm going to give Marty's introduction because Marty is my go-to guy when times are good and when times are bad. There's a lot of heat to that answer either way. But Marty, we have known each other, 7, 8 years,
Too
something
long,
like that.
Right?
Something like that, yeah.
So Marty used to host a show called From Our House to Your Home, which is now going to be a let's call it a TV show on YouTube that we're getting to. But that's not why he's here today.
Okay.
Can you give a little background, first of all, on what frog hauling is? Because there's going to be people that don't live in Columbus that are going to see this. So give them a little background on what it is.
You want me to give away my trade secrets?
No, I just want them to know that frog hauling is not a truck. There is more to it.
And no, we don't haul frogs either. Okay. We are primarily a residential dumpster company. We don't compete with the waste managements of the world, who you will see on large commercial projects. For example, somebody's building a big apartment complex. You'll see the large dumpsters. Our company was designed to serve homeowners, remodeling companies, people that put dumpsters into driveways.
So I'm going to tell, because Jonathan might not know this story. The first time that I meet Marty years ago, it's in a questionable looking area. And I walk in and I sit down and immediately, like, I'm trying to get him to engage and he won't. He's just like, yeah, okay, yeah. So I'm starting to get aggravated because he's not asking me any questions. So I'm thinking, this is not normal. So we go through this thing and at the end he goes, you know, I like you because all these other people were full of shit. Because I'm not telling him, like, we need to buy this. I'm trying to learn about his company.
You're not blowing smoke up his ass.
Yeah, which was great because I was like, well, this is the kind of guy I want to deal with, but I'm in this Boo Radley beaten up contraption of a house. Like, what do we, I don't even see the dumpsters or any of this. So he takes me outside. I'm like, oh, this is well run. Well, what I didn't know was Marty's background is this guy has done it all and did this because he didn't want to retire. Whereas most people start out like, what's an easy way to make money? Can you kind of, without giving up trade secrets, explain the story of how you came to be a dumpster company? Because I think that's more of a wild story. Because I think people will be like, Marty just loves trash. And that's why he's on this show.
Yeah, I'm a trash man.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it goes back to at one time I owned, let's just say, a lot of real estate.
A lot.
Yeah. And it was, I was constantly renting dumpsters, probably rehabbing 3 to 5 properties a month. And I was never really happy with the dumpster service. It was kind of you take what you get in the marketplace. And so putting that aside, I got out of the real estate business, so to speak, right around 2008, right before the crash. And
well timed.
Yeah. I, through dumb luck, escaped that crash. I sold everything right before.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah. So I didn't do anything for a couple of years, and I certainly was not ready to retire. And I was flying down to Florida quite often, playing a lot of golf, getting out of the cold up here. And I happened to read an article in one of those flight magazines in the airplane, and it was about a company, 2 young guys that started I would call it very similar kind of residential dumpster company. They were out of Tampa, Florida, and they created a national franchise. Light bulb went off. And the light bulb was, you know what? There aren't a lot of companies that I'm aware of that really specialize in residential. And the second thing that caught my eye is they had this fancy logo on the side of their truck in their dumpsters. And I went, now that's smart. It's called advertising, branding, and it's totally different from what we see in the marketplace, which is a bunch of old rust buckets, maybe sometimes brushed on addresses on the side of the containers. And they were, the containers, sorry, were of
What
a
kind of setup
size
do we have here?
that they really weren't driveway friendly. You know, they're large dumpsters, but these guys had created sizes that were driveway friendly. So I researched that marketplace all over the country, including Canada, for about 9 months because it intrigued me. And I then hired a marketing firm locally here to do surveys of remodelers, surveys of homeowners that had rented dumpsters, and confirm my belief that there was a marketplace or a need for a company that specialized in residential dumpsters. So I started out with a truck and some dumpsters to test the marketplace, and lo and behold, here we are today.
I think the other part of this that I'd like you to, you don't have to go into the specifics, but you had an accounting background and a sales background. So you started differently than most people would because you had the foresight to figure out the marketing angle, doing surveys. Most people don't. You know, somebody wants to open a restaurant. They just open a restaurant because they're really good at, that's their passion. They're really good at it, whatever.
I have no passion other than for money.
Oh, I know. but that's the interesting thing about this is most people get into their chosen field because they're, you know, people go to college for this and they get all excited. Like, I'm going to be a painter. I'm going to do this. And then they can't make money at it. So then they sell out to take a job. Go ahead.
You know, the other thing is that a lot of people start a business because they're passionate about it, and then they realize they're terrible business owners.
Right.
They're good at what they do, but they're awful business owners.
Right.
So that's interesting to hear your story about how you did it a little bit, you know, ass backwards compared to what the norm is for starting a business. Were you just bored? You got tired of playing golf? I find
Yeah,
hard.
that's it.
Yeah.
And when I told my friends, I said, I'm going to start a dumpster business, they looked at me like I was crazy and said, you're going to do what? You know, it was kind of like, you know, where did this come from? But I mean, to your point, I mean, and this is just me personally. What's that saying? Find something you love to do for the rest of your life.
You'll never work a day in your life.
Okay. To me, the product, how do I want to explain this? Here's what I love to do. I love to run a business. And let me qualify that. I love to run a successful business, okay? I don't care if it would be selling cucumbers. If I could make it successful, I would love that business.
Yeah.
And maybe there's people out there, I mean, I can't speak for the world, but, you know, sometimes my wife will bring me something and I'll go, what an idiot. How many of these ice cream cones do you think you have to sell? You're making 20 cents an ice cream. What? How do you make a living? I don't understand. You know what I mean? So that's kind of a passion thing.
So you look at businesses and you think, well, why do they do that? Why do they do it that way?
Some of our best conversations are literally when we get together, yes, we'll talk about marketing or whatever, but it is more, I have a need to understand things, like how something runs. He's on the other side, like he's looking at the profitability of it.
Right.
Which is interesting because when we're having the conversation, I'm thinking from the artist that's painting it. He's thinking of the materials involved and what we can get out of it, which is a great balance because I want to know that part. He may not want to know the part of the passion that goes into it.
No, I think he made that very clear.
Yeah. But I want to know.
Sorry, I'm guilty.
No, but that's okay because, but you have to have people like we're all looking for somebody that, let's say it's a mentor. You're always looking for somebody you can learn from.
Absolutely.
I couldn't find one, so I found Marty.
Okay, I'm going to start charging for this, okay?
He always said, whenever he gives
Trust me, he's giving me more credit than he should.
But no, I'm saying when I can't understand something, like why would somebody make this move? Like there'll be people that we know in business together where I'm like, say your profit margin, like learning that your profit margin needs to be 30 to 38% somewhere in there to really make money. If you're not thinking that way, but I learned a lot of that and I would ask him and he'd say, that's right. So you'd have to adjust for this and this and this, because I always ask you what you call that chart. When you're making money, you have to put more money into
the relevant range of expense.
See why I can never get that right? But until
do you know what that means? Now
I know
you're
what it
telling
means.
me that
I know what it means because you've yelled it at me many times. But when he showed me that in the beginning, I didn't quite get why a company could be successful, but they were losing money at the same time.
Yeah.
So you haven't built a profit in there to keep up with the demand of more labor and more cost of products.
It's called inflation. I mean,
right.
It's happening.
But when he showed this to me in a different way, where we could only be so successful in the beginning, because the more demand we had, the more stress it was putting on.
Well, the more overhead. The relevant range of expense says that as you grow, your fixed costs are going to do this.
Right.
So in other words, if I want to grow to this level, guess what? I have another truck payment. I have another payment for a worker. So when that happens, your profit margins are going to shrink until you maximize your sales based upon your fixed costs.
But again, it keeps rising. So as you are more successful, you have to take that into account. So I'll give you an example on my business. I don't have a product like an item you can hold, but I had to bring on help. Well, I had to help, as we were making more money, I was paying them because they had more responsibility. When things slow down and go the other way, I can't say, well, now I'm going to adjust the price of what I'm paying you. Right? You can't do that.
Yeah.
But I had to learn that by talking to him, and it was one of those things where it worked itself out, thank God. But he thinks of that first, whereas most people in small business aren't
figure it out
thinking
after
of
the
that.
fact.
Right.
And
They,
it's I got to fix this.
well, yeah, like Marty says, they just want to be successful. What does that mean to you?
It means I do a budget at the beginning of the year and account for anything and everything we're going to spend. I do it by month, and I know what my profit should be. Then the big mistake a lot of entrepreneurs make, not the good ones, the people that have their passion or their hobby becomes their business, it's called cash flow. So the simplest definition of cash flow is take your profit. Now I've got loan payments for equipment I've bought. Well, guess what? That comes out of your profit. Now we get to what your actual cash
Revenue
flows.
minus expenses.
Well, revenue minus expenses minus non-income statement items, which would be loan payments.
Yeah.
The only thing that shows up on an income statement is the interest expense based upon that monthly payment. The principal reduction takes away from your actual profit you're showing on your income statement to get you to cash flow. We can throw in other things. People don't account for taxes. You need to take that away so that you get to this number that says, here is the available cash out of this profit. And I find that, just over people that talk to me at times that sometimes own businesses, I go, well, what's your cash flow? And they look at you kind of, what?
Wait, you struck a chord there. You said something about taxes. We have to pay taxes?
Yeah, we do.
Ice Cube doesn't pay taxes.
No. I mean, I refuse now.
Yeah, it was funny. My son told me he had to write a check and he was all PO'd to the government, and he still owed this much after his estimated payments. And I said, you ought to have a smile on your face. You know what that means? You're making money.
That's right.
Now, the amount I have to pay the government's a whole different story.
Right.
Yep. I have a question, though. So it's kind of backing up here.
Yeah.
What made you decide to get out of the rental business to begin with?
Wow. Okay,
Let me preface that. The reason I ask that is I have clients who own rentals. Mm-hmm. I don't have a single client who is over 70 years old who doesn't want to sell every rental they have.
Well, in this market, I would.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's why I got out of it. If you'll look at the crash that happened, was it 2008?
It was.
Well,
it
2007,
in
2008 was the real third quarter of 2008 is when the bottom really fell out. But 2007 was when it started to
It started.
It just started to seize up. That was the other thing we meant to talk about was the way that I always understood the stock market was three things: automotive, home sales, and the dollar. And now we don't really look at that as that matters anymore, right? Because it's all based on technology stocks and all that kind of thing. In that crash, what we weren't looking for is housing was hot. At the same time, automobiles were. But in the advertising world, the number one indicator of there's a problem coming is always automotive. If automotive dealers start cutting their spend, and I don't mean they cut it from $10,000 a month to $4,000, it's from $30,000 to $0. Something was coming that we knew, but the automotive is always our indicator. Now it will be harder to tell because they can't get parts, they can't get cars on lots.
Oh,
it's crazy.
Your question was, why did I decide to sell?
What was your?
Well, if you let's say you take an apartment complex. The way they're valued in the marketplace is something called a cap rate. And the cap rate is just a multiplier times the net income to give you the value that the market perceives the property is worth. Well, my analysis at that time was I could look at a property and go, here's the cash flow from this property, measured against what the market's telling me it's worth. How many years would I have to keep this property versus selling it today and the profit I can make? And oh, by the way, look at those years and go, how much in the way of repairs might I have to do to these properties? So if I sold it, here's my net proceeds. If I keep it, here's the number of years cash flow minus major expenses. How do they compare to each other? And that's when I said, I'm getting out of this.
This juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Huh?
I said, this juice ain't worth the squeeze.
That's right. So that's how I determined at that point in time to sell. And it was really comical because I had a real estate management company with investors. And let's just say they were making good money. And when I told them I was going to sell everything, they went, what? Because they liked that check they were getting. And I said to them, I'm sorry, but we're not waiting around 8 years on this property to make the profit we can make today.
It's time value of money.
So, well, then you take, okay, I got the bird in hand, the money here, and what can I make on that money? You got to add that in. Excuse me. So that's how I determine. To me, everything's numbers.
Yeah.
As you can see, I'm cold-hearted. I just look at numbers
Yes.
and I go,
So
the numbers are
cold-hearted.
telling me this.
Knowing that he's cold-hearted, I do have a question. So obviously you just love running a successful business. What's your exit strategy?
For my business?
Yeah, is there one?
Death.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, he wants to die in his boots, right? I mean, that's
Well, no, I have an exit strategy. First of all, we will never sell.
okay.
That's up to my sons. My exit strategy is I've been to the attorneys and I've done my wills and I've put my business in a trust. And I have protected my wife because she has an employment contract after I'm dead and gone and the worms are eating me. They have to write her a check. All I care about is, you know, mama's taken care of. Then the business reverts to my sons.
Yep.
I have 4 sons, 2 of them who are involved in the business. So within the trust, there are
Percentages.
mechanisms and for them,
you've got
and they
stuff
get
to-
different things out of the trust. What they do with it after that, it's up to them.
Yeah.
I don't really care, but I mean, we have a successful business that people, my family, my 2 sons are involved in. They enjoy being in the business. That's, you know, if I had 2 sons in the business that said, I'm stuck here, I really don't want to be here, I would have a different approach. But
Sure.
but they are all in the business, and so I don't see any reason to sell it. And besides that, we're in a business, trash never goes away.
No, it doesn't.
The only thing that we ever have to worry about, well, I mean, there's a bunch of things you worry about in business, but I mean, what would be drastic for our business? Government. You know.
Yeah. Well, the reason I asked that question isn't to be nosy. It's just because the last show Michael and I talked about how business owners oftentimes don't begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And the average retiree in the United States retires before they had planned to. They retire earlier than they planned to. And he asked me, he goes, well, why is that? And I said, well, they have a heart attack. They have a stroke.
Whoa. Why
they have
did
a
you make
knee
it sound like I
replacement.
was some idiot? The way,
Well,
what is that? Don't do that.
I
don't do
have
my
to
voice
try.
like that.
I mean, you do that a pretty good job
I
yourself.
asked a legitimate question. I'm not.
just said I
I'm not
made
a
a
cartoon
statement.
bear, dude. I asked a legit question.
He did.
Well, but here's why, because we've had this conversation before, is that, and Jonathan and I have talked about this, I love what I do so much that I don't really look at it as, it's not work. Like, it's not, I'm not digging a hole. But there might be a point in this where I don't want to do this anymore just mentally. Like, I want to break. But I think in his case, what was that he had time off and he got bored and then he re-engaged.
Yeah.
So technically it's still new or newish to him. So it's like starting a whole thing from scratch. There's still life in that. Where I think he'll be at year 12, 15 might be totally different.
Oh, sure.
But, you know, when Marty and I will talk about other business people we know, it's like we can see the hole. You can't see the holes while you're in the hole. Right.
You don't know how deep it is.
So you just keep digging it deeper to the point where you can't get out or you can't make changes.
Yep.
Marty, if you were to say like somebody that's starting a business or they're a couple years in, like what's the most important thing they need to be paying attention to?
Cash flow.
I knew he was going to say cash.
I did too. Cash or checks.
Yeah.
I will say this. Marty will always, when we're having a conversation, will chew my ass if I say somebody hasn't paid me or they're late pay. But again, so would my family. I'm not upset with it. In the beginning, when you're providing a service, you think we're all on the same team.
Right.
It took me probably from the age of 37 to say 43 talking to him about it, where it was like, you know what, at the end of the day, the pandemic was the best thing that happened because you realize the people that they're not really walking with you. They're just around you.
Yeah.
And they all go away. I was grateful for that because it clears the deck so you can start again. I'm not obligated to you. You're not obligated to me. But cash flow picked up because there were a lot of projects that I was doing because I believed in it to get you somewhere, but you didn't believe enough in what I was doing to help you get there.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I've always told my sons, my two boys that are involved in the business and myself, we are the absolute last people to get paid. We don't draw paychecks.
Oh, you mean the business? The business gets paid. You guys don't get paid first.
My employees
Employees
my
go first,
vendors, my business, because the business is the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yep.
And you can't, if you haven't put enough away money to get you through the bad times, as far as I'm concerned, you're get rid of the business you're in, or
it's your own damn
figure
fault.
out. It's not, it doesn't make sense. I mean, one of the rules of thumb in business is you should at least have 10% of your sales in cash. Now think about that. You've got a business that's grossing $2 million a year. You should have $200,000 in the bank that's untouchable. I think that's too
Probably
little.
a little light.
Too little.
Yeah.
That's light. I tend to look at it and go, if things go terrible, can I go 6 months? And I can't draw a check. My boys can't draw a check, but the world could pass us by, but we still can survive. And like they say, what percentage of small business goes out of business in the first 5 years? And then the second thing I would ask is, of those that went out of business, how much of them had the financial wherewithal to weather a storm? And I think a mistake that a lot of businesses make is they don't have the reserve fund or even think of that. And I'm sorry, if you're a small business person, you better have a reserve fund. That's just part of small business.
I think the pandemic exposed that for a lot of people.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why, 50% of restaurants aren't reopening.
Right.
Yeah, and bars, same thing.
Yeah.
Marty, last thing before we get out of here.
Sure.
Because I always come to you with questions. Not everybody's going to get to. Somebody owns a small business right now in 2021. What is the one piece of business advice that you would give them?
Be conservative and cautious. And the reason is we have a change in politics going on right now.
I haven't noticed that, but sure.
But, you have to, let me put it this way, the insidious tax that exists on the American population right now is inflation. It's a hidden tax.
Yep.
And all of the supply chains are constrained. And what do I mean by that? You go to order furniture today or go into a furniture store, most of them are going to tell you it's 6 to 8 months. Factories were closed down during COVID, so to speak. You want to order steel. Steel's up 70% today, okay? So to simplify it, if you a year ago went into the grocery store and you bought $100 worth of groceries, and you go back today and you buy $100 worth of groceries, the question you have to ask yourself, am I getting the same amount of groceries? And the answer is no.
Yeah, no way in
And
hell.
so when I say there's a change in politics, you cannot print money like we are printing and not expect inflation. It just doesn't happen. And so my worry as a business owner is there is plenty of opportunity for me to expand currently and do, just prepared for more sales. I have become very cautious. And so what does that mean? That means because of this inflation, are we going to be headed to a recession? Because I am not going to go out and spend on equipment like I may have done before. And that person that I would have bought that equipment from, now his sales are going down. So what does he do? He has to cut expenses or raise prices or some combination thereof. It becomes a vicious circle. I think that perhaps we are in a position where we may be looking at a recession. So that's my advice to business.
What I want to say in closing is this is the third straight show that we're ending on a down note. And that's the real history of this show. Marty, thank you for coming in. I love you for being here.
You on a downer. No, that was
wait a minute.
That was a positive. You asked me to give advice.
Jonathan, would you like to talk about any
doesn't
relatives
mean
that
I'm
died
right.
before we get out of here?
Yeah, so hey, guess what? We're all gonna die. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, we are at some point.
Nate, if we could at the
Hopefully
end of
not
this just
tomorrow.
put like some kind of a happy song on the end of this. I mean, boys,
Another
thanks so much.
useless production.
Oh my God.
Okay, here's the ending. All of that's irrelevant. Your job as an entrepreneur is to survive, come out on the other side better than you were today. How's that?
That's
and
fantastic.
you will.
Isn't that what I just said? I tried to explain that.
But it's like in the beginning when you changed the name of the segment and you said his was better. His was better.
Yeah.
That's it for Broad Street Radio this week. We'll see you next week.